Let's start the show by talking about my sponsor, Paloma Verde, and their new website, palomaverdecbd.com. Head over to palomaverdecbd.com and check them out for all of your CBD needs. They've got the gummies, tinctures, salves. So if you're needing anything to maybe chill you out, something to help you get mellowed out, something for your joint pain and stiffness, go over to palomaverdecbd.com and give them a check out. Carlos and Vanessa are awesome people. They run a great company. And if you enter the promo code FACTS at checkout, you'll get 25% off your order. Plus, any order over $75, you get free shipping. So, I don't know what you're waiting for. Head over to palomaverdecbd.com and check them out. Let's start the show. This episode will be completely taken out of context. Welcome to the Fact Check This podcast. All right, Fact Check This podcast. And today, I don't know how much I've actually talked about it on here, but several years ago, I got divorced and kind of went through a finding myself kind of stage in life. The divorce was nasty, and I was in a bad place mentally. Plus, I just wasn't in a good place physically at the time either. I was living in Pennsylvania, and about 30 miles north of Philadelphia, and I really didn't like living there. For anybody who has picked up from my accent, I am not from that part of the country, and I was very uncomfortable there. It's just not. I am not a city person. I'm an old country boy, and that's where I want to be. So while it was a good experience, it was really hard on me. Plus the divorce and everything else. So I went through some time where I never really fell away from my faith, but I kind of hit a point in life where I had been trying to do something, which that something was make my marriage work. And I had failed for a lot of my own fault, and also a lot of things that I had no control over. So I went through a kind of a dark spot where I didn't want anything to do with God, faith, any of that stuff. And then I found my way out of that in a really unique way. But coming out of that, I also started to explore other things, which is not to say that I'm not Christian today or that I ever stopped being a Christian. If nothing else, and I've talked about this with other people, Adam, Patrick, if you're talking over me in particular, like the things that I looked at and explored and went through, if nothing else, it strengthened my faith. And one of the things that I really enjoyed during that time was listening to Alan Watts. If you listen to his lectures and his talks and stuff, he talks about really lofty, interesting ideas and Taoism and stuff like that. He's also a biblical scholar, and he's very knowledgeable. And he has a unique way of looking at the world and the universe and everything in it, which I really, really like. Like it never, it doesn't change the way I view my faith or Christianity. It just kind of gives me a different frame of reference and kind of enriches what I already think and feel and believe. So anyway, today, as just dumb luck would have it, I was actually listening to an Alan Watts lecture, and I came across something really interesting where he talks about religion and politics to an extent. So I'm going to play that, and then I want to kind of dig into that briefly. I don't intend for this to be a real long episode, and real long by my standards, meaning like 15-20 minutes. I'd like to keep this pretty short, just because I'm pre-recording this. I'll be working a bunch here over the next several days, and I'm not going to have a lot of time to sit down and do anything, at least for the next 3-4 days. So I would like to get something out there, and this felt like a really good something, especially when I heard it. So I'm gonna pop this up and play this right quick, and then we'll kind of go from there.
But in the same way as your heart beats without your having to govern it, it does it of itself. So the Taoist view of the universe is that everything happens by itself. And yet, just because everything happens of itself and you leave it alone and don't try to push it around, it's orderly. Now, this is a very democratic theory. I can't understand for the life of me how people can be members of a republic like the United States and think that this is the best form of government and yet hold to a monarchical theory of the universe. If the universe is a monarchy, then that's obviously the best form of government. And you ought to have a monarchy here. But you don't. And because you consider that you had bad experience in past times under the British and other kinds of rulers, and to hell with all that. You're going to be self-governing. Well, to be self-governing, you have to have a measure of anarchy. In other words, you have to trust other people. And this is the country, because it consists of people who originally lived under monarchies, finds it very difficult to trust other people. This is the most paranoid country on earth. And it's always saying there ought to be a law against it. To stop people doing this, stop them doing that. Well, you know, it's terrified that they may run amok. But you've got to take the risk, if you want to live in a democracy, of your neighbor running amok, because democracy is simply based on trusting your neighbor, even though he may be a crook. Otherwise, you have to have a police state and you're back to a monarchy of some kind. Whether the individual in charge is one person or a committee makes no difference.
I found that segment really interesting, especially with kind of what we have in the United States today. If you look at how we're governed, and this is something that neo-reactionaries and paleo-libertarians and the post-libertarians and all these different factions kind of talk about, and then more blue-pilled or beltway libertarians will fight over it with them, and it turns into this whole big thing, is the idea of democracy versus monarchy versus anarchy. And I kind of fashion myself as an anarchist and really always have. And I really got to thinking about what Alan Watts was talking about in this piece, because it's something that in modern society, I think, has been lost. That there really is a high level of anarchy that has to exist in order for democracy to function properly. There's a high level of trust, a high level of allowing other people to do what they're going to do, because you can't browbeat each individual into a thing. We're all separate individuals. We're all very unique and different in our own specific ways. And so if you look at governance through that lens of, you know, we are all very separate and individual and unique. And democracy is sort of a network that brings those things together. But at the end of the day, there still has to be the individualism. There still has to be the pieces. And those pieces are going to function the way they do. And the governing system has to allow that. It has to allow those pieces to function as individuals. And if you don't trust those individuals, if you don't trust those pieces to do more or less the right thing, if you don't believe that human beings are at some base level good and trustworthy, then it has to go back to some monarchical form. And there's arguments to be made for the case of monarchy in that the monarch is the sole proprietor of this kingdom. And so he or she has authority and they have investment in seeing it be successful. And historically, you've seen that good kings and queens were well loved and their empires flourished. And bad monarchs were abjectly hated and ultimately assassinated, or the empire would devolve into some level of disarray and ultimately destruction in some form. And on the on the topic of looking at religion, that kind of stuff, like you see that through the Bible too. Whenever there were good, strong leaders, the Jewish people flourished and did well. And when they had bad leaders that took them in the wrong direction, then they crumbled and became enslaved by somebody else, or what have you. And historically, that's kind of the way it has always worked. And what we've moved to currently is kind of what Watts was talking about towards the end of that. We are this society that, and I can't say everybody, because I know that's not true, and everybody else who might be listening to this knows it's not true. But at least half of our society does not trust the other half. And it's possible that the same could be said vice versa. I know, as much as I would like this not to be the case, I don't have a whole lot of trust in really either side to do what's right, to allow the individual to be and to exist and to live and to let nature take its course. What we've run into is a dictatorial monarchical system, sort of like what he was talking about at the end, but instead of it being an individual, it is a committee, it is a group, it is those in power in the government. And the ones who back them that don't trust that people will do the right thing, that people are interested in what is good and right and just and taking care of each other. They think that it needs to be a centralized force that does it, that makes it happen. And the really fucked up thing about that is those people who are pushing for that the most, they think that they're protecting democracy. When at the end of the day, democracy is somewhat organized anarchy. And this thing that they are perverted democracy into and are trying to create, it is totalitarianism. Not in the way of one individual who sits at the top and rains down on everyone else, but in that the group, the committee, those who have the power, force that power down on everyone else. And I don't understand how they're so blind to it, how they don't see it, how they don't understand that that's what it is. Like, you're not defending democracy, you're not protecting the republic. You are creating this horrible, truly fascist thing that does not represent individuals. It represents a collective power structure that is designed for those at the top. And that's it. The rest are all worker bees feeding the queen. And it's not a individual queen. It's not an individual monarch. It is this group, this committee, as Alan Watts described it. And how have we devolved to that point as a society? How? Boggles the mind. I'm going to wrap up on that. Something that I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit. Going forward, I'm going to change directions with this a little bit. I'm still going to do some political stuff, and I do intend to do interviews and stuff like that. I really like those. I have a lot of fun with the interviews. But in terms of like general content wise, I'm going to be changing direction a little bit and focusing a little bit more on some of the stuff that my wife and I have been doing. The gardening side of stuff, the raising animals side of stuff, being independent of the system to an extent. Finding ways to grow your own food, finding ways to be independent. I mean, that's the best word for it, because like we haven't seen it here, but everybody's seen the pictures like all over the country of empty shelves. And you've heard the stories of shortages or supply chain issues. Everybody's seen all of the cargo ships that are sitting off the coasts that can't get unloaded, of planes, trains, trucks that are being shut down for various reasons, different levels of technology that are currently behind because of lockdowns and never being able to catch back up from what's gone on over the last 18 months. And if you're one of the people who's sitting around looking at that going, oh shit, what am I going to do? You're already behind. So sometime in the next couple of weeks, I'll be having a conversation with Stacy for Truth, and we're going to start, because she's on a similar journey of doing some personal farming type stuff and growing her own food. And so we're going to have a conversation about that. And we're going to talk about like some of the baseline steps that people can take to start producing their own food and to break some of that dependence on the system. And then I plan on digging more into topics and stuff like that and get a little bit deeper into it, because there are a lot of things that like the average person could do. They just have no idea how easy it is to do. So going forward, we're going to be looking at some of that stuff and tackling some of those sorts of topics, and being a little more specifically focused on how do you gain your independence from this system that we've been put in. Because talking about, the founding of the country and the ideas of the individual and everything, like there was a time when everyone grew their own food. There was a time when you didn't go to Walmart for all of your needs. You produced it yourself. And there were hardware stores and, electronic stores and stuff like that for the stuff that didn't know how to do, the stuff that was really specialized. But generally speaking, everybody to some extent had their own food supply. And that's not the case anymore. And it's created this really weak, soft, codependent society that is not prepared for what could happen if that stops. And while I really hope that I'm wrong, I really think that it's going to stop sooner rather than later. So I want to help people be prepared for that. So that'll be the direction I go over the next several months, and we'll see how that goes. Like I said, I still plan on doing some interviews and having some fun with it. And if there are specific topics that anybody wants to hear about, stuff that you don't know how to do and you want to know, like let me know, and we can start digging into that stuff specifically and get some ideas on the table and go from there. In the meantime, I hope everybody has a good week, and I will be back on Wednesday with another episode.